Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Frankly Speaking. I'm, of course, your host, Frank Zaberick, and in the great words of that great game show host, Steve Harvey, we got another good one for you today, folks. Today, well, I guess people who watched Frankly Speaking, faithfully know that about 5 or 6 years ago or so, I've had a group that I met through Soul Fest, that annual Christian musical festival. And they're called the New Hampshire Right to Life, basically a pro-life advocacy group that works out of New Hampshire, and they fight basically for the rights of abortion. Hopefully that probably eliminate abortion in the state if they could push it that way, or as much as they possibly can. But anyway, for the past year or so, I guess there was a thing where Roe v. Wade, which was another one of their major goals from 5 or 6 years ago, I know for a fact, to kind of, they were praying and stuff like that, that somehow, some way, Roe v. Wade would be overturned. And lo and behold, last summer of 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. But I guess New Hampshire, it's not that abortion has been eliminated totally. It's now on the onus of each of the 50 states to, set up their own state legislature on having their own abortion laws. And I guess New Hampshire, I could be wrong. I should be corrected here in a couple of minutes. I think it's something like 25, 26 weeks that a woman has up to get an abortion. But to find out all that, I'll introduce my next guest here. And he's from the New Hampshire Right to Life. He's the vice president of the New Hampshire Right to Life, Kurt Wuelper. Kurt, how you doing today?
I'm doing just great, Frank. Yourself?
Oh, excellent.
Another great
And I have
alive.
a ton of questions here, but before we do that, I'd like to have all my guests, especially if they're first time on Frankly Speaking, to tell my TV/internet audience a little bit about yourself and how did you get involved in the New Hampshire Right to Life, and what exactly does the vice president of that organization do?
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay, so we'll give you the Cliff Notes version.
Okay.
Because it's been involved with New Hampshire Right to Life now for close to 20 years.
Wow.
And I've been involved in the Life movement a number of years longer than that. So who am I? I was born and raised in Belmont, New Hampshire. Worked for 38 years at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, not Maine.
Okay. Okay, no.
That's a sore spot with a lot of people. I'm one.
Oh, okay.
And back in 2000, and I got married. I have a wife. I have a couple of grandchildren. We live up in Stratford, New Hampshire now, in a 200-odd-year home. My wife's homestead house.
Wow. Right,
which is another story in itself. We have a son and 2 granddaughters. They live over in the Keene area. And one is getting ready to, she'll be a junior in high school this year, and the other's a freshman in high school in Keene. As far as Life is concerned, I got involved with Life partially as a political issue back in the late 80s, early 90s. But at that point in my life, it was just a political issue, like a lot of political issues. So I thought about it a little bit, but I came down on the side of Life, and so I was that was something I was interested in. But it was more when my wife started to volunteer at a pregnancy help center in Dover that I got more involved, because you know how that is. She volunteers, you volunteer with her, right?
Yeah.
And so I got more involved. And the more involved I was, and that was the first thing that made me see the real challenges that women face with unexpected pregnancies, problem pregnancies, because that's what the Pregnancy Help Center did then, and it's what they're still doing in Rochester. Right? We have 14 of those in the state. More than twice as many. I think it's 4 times as many now, because Planned Parenthood closed a clinic or 2. Pregnancy centers to help women with their pregnancies, as opposed to abortion mills that help women kill their babies. In any event, I have to learn to not say that so often anymore. Take the lives of their preborn children.
Yeah.
Nicer. Doesn't upset so many people. Anyway, so I got more involved then. One way or another, 1994, I got saved, became a Christian.
Oh, okay.
And then things that had resonated with me all my life took on an entirely different meaning. Things like we find these truths to be self-evident, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And I went, oh, wow, yeah, endowed by their Creator, inalienable, means you can't have them taken away or given away. There's nothing can separate you from those rights. Wow. And that really solidified and energized me in terms of life, because for me it was the most fundamental thing. And I tell people, and I've been telling them that forever, ever since, that if a politician can't understand the life issue in that way, that it's the most fundamental human right, and get that right, then I don't want to have anything to do with them. I don't care who it is. I don't care what party they're in or anything else, because there's something wrong in their head. Simple as that, right? So I got involved. I started volunteering with various places. New Hampshire Right to Life. My wife and I volunteered with a thing called World Vision at Soulfest.
Oh, okay.
Right? So I think it was the first year they were in Guilford.
Oh, okay. They moved from Loon Mountain to Guilford.
Yeah, they moved from Loon Mountain to Guilford.
Okay.
And so we volunteered with World Vision.
All right.
And we went up and they feed children, care for children, you adopt children, right? So we worked there, that volunteer time with them, a few hours on whatever day it was. And then we started wandering around the rest of Soulfest. And we came to a booth that was closed. And it shouldn't have been closed. This was like relatively heavy traffic time.
Oh.
Right? But it shouldn't have been closed. I went, I don't know what that is. And I went over and looked, and it was New Hampshire Right to Life. And I said, I can't have that closed. So I opened it. I knew nothing about New Hampshire Right to Life. They had a booth. Right?
All right.
So I opened it. And it was only an hour or two later that their then president showed up to open the booth.
Oh, wow.
And that was the beginning of my relationship with New Hampshire Right to Life.
Wow.
After that, we volunteered some other places. The most memorable one, and it shows you where this whole thing has always been. At that time, New Hampshire Right to Life was welcomed at a lot of fairs, Sandwich Fair, the Deerfield Fair, Hopkinton Fair. So they had a booth at the Hopkinton Fair, and Ed called me up. I guess Ed must have been president then. He called me up and he says, I want you to go out and work at the booth in Hopkinton. I said, I can't do it. He said, of course you can, just go do it. Right? And so we went. Well, at that time, they had a TV set, right? Like this big.
Yeah.
Right? And they were playing on a loop The Silent Scream.
Okay, that's one of my questions, but
which
go ahead.
was a silent movie.
Oh, okay.
Right? No sound.
Okay.
It was just the video of that baby and its life and demise. That so upset the other vendors, is what we were told, at the Hopkinton Fair, that they would never have us again.
So the Hopkinton Fair is a secular type fair, or is it
just
a
a fair.
Christian? Oh, it's not Christian
Oh,
Catholic.
no. It's just like all the others, the Deerfield Fair, the fair,
Deerfield,
Rochester
okay.
Fair, whatever, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And they just said, we're not having you anymore, you can't come. Right? Because people couldn't stand to see the truth. Right? And so it was so upsetting to them, they told us we couldn't do it. And we haven't done We haven't done fairs now for a while. We're going to try and get back into that, I think.
But not show the silent scream.
And no, you didn't see that when you were down at Soulfest.
Oh,
right?
That's true. Oh, okay.
Right.
Also, even at Soulfest, they wouldn't allow something
we
like
never tried it.
Oh, you never tried it. Okay.
Once burned, twice shy, I guess is a word to put it. But it was more than twice because Hopkinton wasn't the only place that said they just didn't want to have us anymore. Right? We used to be at market days in Portsmouth, and they called us up and said, no, we don't want to give you any space anymore.
All right.
And we said, well, why not? She said, well, it's too controversial. We said, well, you give Planned Parenthood space. Well, yeah, but they're different.
Wow.
And it's the same thing. It's a private event.
Yeah.
So if they don't want to have you, you can't be there. And we never took the trouble to actually engage in some kind of civil protest outside of market days in Portsmouth.
So has New Hampshire Right to Life changed considerably since last year, since one of your major goals was accomplished?
No.
One of your prayers was answered.
No. Look, so the big thing about Roe versus Wade, and you're right, it was a major issue for us because we have in the past, we are now, and we will in the future, always be striving to protect all innocent human life from conception until natural death. All ages, all people. Doesn't matter where you are or whatever, how old you are, right? And we're fighting that now way more, and we may get in, well, maybe I'll just go do it this way. So Roe versus Wade put a big blanket over the conversation. And they said, you can't talk about this. You can't. These are restrictions that are insurmountable through the political process. Right? So we're setting down some rules. And they thought they would quiet the issue in 1973. And it took 50 years, 49, for them to come to recognize that they had already, that in the quiet time that they created with Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court heard abortion cases virtually every single year. And they went, and they constantly were chipping away at Roe versus Wade. The very day it was issued, they chipped away at it with Doe versus Bolton. But anyway, they created this firewall. You can't go beyond viability. You can't go beyond the third trimester, however you want to express that. Right? And then you can only do certain things. And then you have to have certain exceptions. Or you have to have uncertain exceptions. Right? So it was a huge barrier to getting to where the people wanted to be. Especially where we wanted to be, because we're on the left side of life. But as I think our political process has shown, and will continue to show, where the people want to be. So that was a big deal when it got overturned. But it wasn't, we didn't do anything different the day after than outside of celebration, we didn't do anything different the day after than the day before. Because through that entire period, we have been advocating for what was protection of all human life. And so we continued to do that. Well, I spent 4 terms in the House. And every session, that's every 2 years, we would put in a life begins at conception bill or a 6-week abortion ban bill. And my political compatriots would say, you're crazy, you shouldn't do that. It's bad for us. Why is it bad for us? Well, because it's going to make us look bad. No, I tell them, no. There's a right in this and a wrong. And if we aren't doing this, at least trying, even though we know we're going to fail, right? It takes 201 votes to make something happen in the New Hampshire House. I think the most we ever got for a conception bill or a 6-week bill was 103 or 105. And that's what I tell them. I said, look, we're going to introduce the bill. It's going to be heard in committee. We'll have good testimony. We'll have civil debate on the floor, and we'll get 100 or 110 votes. Or maybe we pick up a couple. But that's beside the point. The point is that it has to be, that idea has to be in the public forum, all right? That this really should go way back. So when Dobbs, still under Roe versus Wade, 4 times we tried to do what was allowable under the constitutional constraint. That is a ban on abortion, effectively a ban. I don't like that word ban. I have to restrict abortion to babies that were not viable. Allowing for those very rare cases and exceptions where there's important, like when the mother's life is in danger.
Okay.
Right? So if the pregnancy itself is endangering the mother's life, that's never been a part of any kind of abortion law that's ever been introduced, anywhere, including New Hampshire. Right? So that sets itself apart, right? But basically without any exceptions, because what had been the case was that we had to allow an exception for the health of the mother. And health was so broadly defined that if the woman said, well, I'm going to have bad headaches, well, that affects her health. Or I'll get depressed after I have the baby. That would be reason enough to take the life of the preborn child, even if it were viable. So, but before Roe versus Wade was overturned, we managed to get the Fetal Life Protection Act written into law in New Hampshire. And that set the bar at 24 weeks.
Okay.
Well, or thereabouts. Right? Because we said if it's known or should be known, if there's reasonable reason to believe that the baby is at 24 weeks or very close to, then you have to do an ultrasound to prove the age. And if it's 24 weeks or more, then the abortion shouldn't be allowed. The abortion becomes a crime because you're taking the life of a living human being who can live outside the womb.
Is just a quick question. Somebody, in fact, I had a Christian here. In our church we had a thing called Christians, a Christian perspective on abortion. And he was saying that in New Hampshire's a very liberal state versus the other 50 when it comes to abortion. I mean, it's not quite like you'd think Alabama, Mississippi, Texas probably has like 0 abortions. Or you'd probably have to do it within the first month or you're out of luck, so to speak, those states.
So two parts to that.
Okay.
Number one, the most first of all, I think there's one state in the United States which actually had 0 abortions last year. And that was South Dakota.
Oh, okay. I would have.
Because they have no abortion mills. They've all gone away. And their laws are quite strict.
Okay.
Okay?
I would have picked the southern state, but that's...
Well, they just happen to be, but if you take a state like Texas, it's so huge.
Yeah, right.
Right? And it's like that. I mean, South Dakota, anyway. So okay. South Dakota is the only one with no abortions last year, as far as we know.
Okay.
All right. The laws in the state of New Hampshire prior to the Fetal Life Protection Act, which is only a couple of years old, there weren't any. There were no laws, which meant that any abortion was allowable for any reason, at any time, right up until birth. There are only, I think it's 4 countries in the world, and I think 7 states in the United States that had that amount of freedom for abortion. And that came about because when the Democrats were in control, when Governor Shaheen was governor, they repealed all the laws we had on the books, all the abortion laws. So in between there, as I said, we've been doing this for a long time. So we got a parental notification law through, had to take 2 trips to the Supreme Court to do U.S. Supreme Court to do that because the pro-aborts were so opposed to it. Right? So 2 trips, we got that to the Supreme Court. We got the parental notification done. We got protection for the preborn in the case of homicide. That took, well, first we got it for for everything except first and second degree. So we got it for accidental, right? Well, and that came about. First they said, well, no, we won't make it, we'll put enhanced penalties on the criminal. And that we'll just say a drunk driver. We'll put enhanced penalties on the drunk driver if the mother and the baby die. But if the mother lived and the baby died, there was no crime. No crime at all. All right?
Incredible.
But that's, anyway, so we got that changed, and we did get that installed. That was about 8 years ago now, 7, 8 years ago, where the baby at 20 weeks old or older was a separate crime. So if they're in any criminal act or in any act that causes the death of the mother.
Okay.
So.
Now, just out of morbid curiosity, I'm a news junkie and I watch a lot of like Fox News, Newsmax, and all that kind of good stuff. And there's I guess there's a thing where they're claiming that the FBI went after like I guess Catholic. Pro-life Catholic groups that they like have them arrested. Sometimes the FBI goes in the person's house and takes the protester at like 5, 6 in the morning or something like that. Has New Hampshire Right to Life organizations? Because you guys protest sometimes in front of like
abortion clinics.
Abortion clinics, yeah.
For their fundraisers,
Planned Parenthood,
and things like that. Yeah. Yeah, we do that sometimes now. It's rare now, and we'll get to why in a minute. But that used to be very.
But it wasn't by arrest or by threatening to arrest you or anything like that. Oh,
I'm getting to your answer. Right?
Okay.
You know me. I can't just give you a straight answer.
Yeah, okay.
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 The abortion movement in the beginning was really seen as anything that you wanted to do to protect the innocent children was ethical and moral. And so it involved a lot of very confrontational and sometimes violent actions. Now, we never sanctioned anything like actual violence against abortion workers or anything like that. Every one of those cases that came up, and they were all over the press for years and years. Everybody in the pro-life movement condemned those things when they happened. But we were out on the streets, and people were getting arrested and jailed for doing what, for protesting, right? Right down in Portsmouth, I remember, and I won't tell you her name, it doesn't matter.
All right.
But a friend of mine had her wrist broken by a police officer because they were protesting outside the clinic. And they wanted her to go away, and the police wanted her to go away, and she didn't want to. So, and I guess they were trying to handcuff her and broke her wrist at the time. That's the most serious thing I know of that's actually happened in the state of New Hampshire. But there's been nothing like that for a long time because first we learned that it wasn't very effective. And so we changed our ways. And the whole pro-life movement has been like that. So we started working much more through legal areas, through building pregnancy centers. Right? That whole pregnancy center movement only started 25 years ago. When the one my wife was volunteering at in the early 90s was the first one that was actually a medical clinic and could do ultrasounds to determine the age of the baby. Right? They were the only clinic in the state that could, pregnancy center that could do that. Now they all do it, and they all have 4D ultrasounds, and they save a lot of babies that way. And they save a lot of mothers the grief of going through an abortion as well.
Incredible. Incredible.
So, but yeah. So the history of the pro-life movement is that the authorities have never been on our side. They've always been opposed to what we were doing. We do a lot better in Concord now. Right? We reach.
When I had this guy from my church, and we were talking about Roe v. Wade. In fact, I knew of I became a Christian in like the mid 70s, and I knew one of these. In fact, the group that I was involved with, it was called a cult for a number of reasons, and one of them, the leader of this ministry, so to speak, he proclaimed that abortion was okay. No, the life of a child started at first breath. There's a verse in Genesis, I guess, and it goes like when God created man, he first breathed into the nostrils.
Genesis chapter 2, I just happened to read that this morning.
What a coincidence. And anyway, he based it on that a baby's not really living until the first breath, until that first cry comes out, then he's officially alive.
Right. Until
then, it's just kind of like a blob of
it's something else.
Cells or something like that.
It's something else.
And I was just saying that it's even in like 73, and he was this Christian pastor. In fact, the kid was younger than me, saying that there was no push with like Catholic priests or Protestant ministers, even at that time, to push for a more strict pro-life movement in the country. And that's why hence they had Roe v. Wade, making like, kind of like a uniform law for all abortions.
So a couple aspects to that.
Okay.
So let's go back to when he breathed, and that's what gave him the life.
Okay.
Okay. The whole abortion business rests on the moral principle that there's a difference between human life and everything else. And I can remember one of the things I learned when I was in all the stuff I've done to become an effective advocate, right, was this little question. So suppose you're standing at your kitchen window, you're at the sink, and you're looking out the window, and your child's out, or your child comes up behind you, toddler, couple, 3 years old, and says, "Daddy, can I kill this?" What do you say to him? You say, "What is it?" And if the answer is it's a fly or a mosquito or something like that,
yeah, go ahead and kill it.
Yeah, go ahead, or even an ant or a moth, right? Go ahead and kill it. But if the answer that's a human being, then you would have to say, "No, you can't kill that." You wouldn't tell him you could kill a puppy. Right?
Yeah.
So the whole abortion business rests on the idea that it's not a human life. If it is a human life, I don't see how you can not say it has that fundamental right to live. And so they say, "Oh no, it was a blob of tissue or it's something else." They want to call it by all the technical terms, so you can't recognize that it's a baby. Right? You go to Planned Parenthood or other abortion mills, they don't call them babies, they don't call mothers mothers. Right? Now they're not trying to get away from even calling, never mind, I don't want to go there. That's a rabbit trail.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Birthing people. Anyway.
Okay.
But they hide behind the language. Because it doesn't sound as bad to say, "Oh, take the life of a fetus," as it does to say, "Take the life of her baby." So it's just a lie. Because now we know. And when they did Roe versus Wade, they went on through all this stuff like you talked about, and they said, since we don't know, then we're not going to, the most generous interpretation, we're not going to protect that life. because we don't know if it's human or not. They could have just said, well, it could be human, and so even just on the chance that it is, we're going to protect it. But they went the other way. But Roe versus Wade, people don't know this, overturned the laws of every state. Most states had significant restrictions on abortion. Some of them had loosened them a fair amount. Just a few. But Roe versus Wade overturned every state and said, okay, we're now going to put this down from the top. And that's the reason why, at that moment, there wasn't a lot of pushback from the religious community. Because this had been working its way through the political process. And if you do go through the political process, then there's a lot to be said for a Christian is responsible for obeying the laws. So now you got the law of the land coming from the Supreme Court, and the place to do that is in the political process, and that's exactly where the pro-life movement has been for 50 years.
Now, I guess a lot of liberals especially are pro-choicers, especially saying that the vast majority of Americans are promoting the pro-choice movement. Keep your bleeping hands off my body type of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that. I mean, granted, like California, New York, Massachusetts, I mean, the abortion, the politicians who are pro-choice will probably, kick butt in their elections. But in most of the country, would that hold true?
No.
And,
no.
And then you got Biden and a Chuck Schumer, the majority Senate leader, saying, make no mistake about it, 2024 is going to be, Roe v. Wade is going to be on the ballot that year.
So they're going to keep it, they're going to keep this in the forefront.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, by the way, what New Hampshire Right to Life has been looking for 50 years. To make abortion the paramount social issue. It's part of our mission statement.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
But it is.
Okay.
Right? And the reason it is because this is exactly where it should be. It should be out here in the public, and we should all be talking about it. And we should find areas where we can agree, and protections where those are applicable, and freedom where that's applicable. That's how we do criminal law. For everything else, or all kinds of law. That's what law is. Law says, okay, you can go this far, and you can do anything you want, but over here, the state's going to come in and say, no, you've gone too far, because we're trying to protect the mass of the people. We're doing what's for the best for everyone. Well, it should be the same thing here. And we 100% believe as long as we have these conversations in friendly tones, that we'll come to the right place in the end. Right? And so you can see now, I think it's 26 states since Dobbs, 26 have passed or have enacted significant restrictions on abortion. Some of them, Texas has a 6-week restriction. Right? Florida has a 6-week restriction.
Oh, okay.
That's what Governor DeSantis is very proud of. All right. California has virtually none. New York has virtually none. Maine used to be more restrictive than New Hampshire until we passed the Fetal Life Protection Act, at which time they had a restriction at about the same time we do, 24 weeks, but theirs had more exceptions.
All right.
Okay? But they still had that same barrier. You go to Europe, and in most countries in Europe, practically all of them, abortion is very, very restricted after 12 weeks.
Wow.
12. Not 24, not 15, 12.
Just out of curiosity, how does New Hampshire compare with Massachusetts?
Massachusetts has gone off the deep end in terms of that's where they have gone.
Okay.
Because again, they had a law very similar to ours, right? At roughly 24 weeks, but theirs had many exceptions before, including the undefined or unregulated health exception. And once you have that unregulated health exception, then the doors are wide open for anything, because everything affects one form of health or another. So,
one thing that I mentioned, in fact, I was talking to that Christian from that my pastor, but I didn't know how to pronounce the word. And the word I'm thinking of now is called infanticide.
Yeah.
It looks like infanticide, like
infanticide,
homicide.
yeah.
Infanticide. But that is if a baby survives the abortion procedure. And I guess, no, isn't that like a vacuum type situation, a vacuum cleaner type situation that the Planned Parenthood?
No, this is part of the ignorance that has been produced and propagandized, utilized by the abortion industry. Very early abortions, under 12 weeks, are usually done by what's called vacuum aspiration.
Okay.
Right, and that's like they put a vacuum cleaner inside, suck off all the little bit of baby that's there. Because you got to remember, these feet right here
Okay, yeah.
are the actual size of the baby's feet at 10 weeks. 10 weeks, right? So that right there, that's the size of those feet. That's the real size, right? Well, you saw it in the smallest models we had at Soulfest.
Yeah, at Soulfest,
right? But you don't think of it that way, right? Those small, well, anyway. So that's the actual size. The whole baby would fit easily in your hand like this, right?
Yeah.
So that's how it's typically done. Now, later on, things change, and they change quite rapidly because the baby grows quite quickly. So by the time you get to 13, 15 weeks, they can't do it that way anymore because they can't suck them apart. So they have to go in and do what they call a D&E. Dismemberment. The abortionist actually cuts the baby up or tears the baby apart. Cuts is not the right word because the actual somebody who has actually done it would say this: you reach in with a pair of forceps and you grab, and whatever you grab, you mouth onto it, and then you pull it out, whatever it is. Usually it's a hand or an arm. And piece by piece, the pieces are pulled out and placed on a little tray. And Abby Johnson, in her movie Unplanned, talked about that. And she talked about it's somebody's business at the abortion mill to actually look at all the pieces and parts and make sure they're all there. Because you have to get the whole thing. So somebody's business. That's why they pull them out piece by piece, lay it side by side. I got gruesome pictures and videos and all that to show all this stuff. And this is, okay, but that's only in the second trimester.
All right.
So that's between 12 and like 20 weeks, 21 weeks maybe. By 22, 23 weeks, you can't do it that way because the baby's too tough.
So, okay, they're in the third trimester.
And then they do worse.
But if the baby, okay, let's, hypothetically speaking, the baby came out, they want to abort it, but the baby came out,
oh, yes.
and it started crying.
Right.
And it was, even in that cult I belong to that says first breath, if it starts crying, if it starts doing stuff in its diaper, it's a life.
Absolutely.
And that would be murder.
So that's you would think so.
But it's not murder. Infanticide is not murder.
Infanticide is murder. And when we put it, we have tried, I don't know, 3 times, 4 times. to get bills, get the law in New Hampshire to say exactly that. That if the baby survives the abortion, it is in fact murder to not give it good medical care. We have failed every time. We have failed every time because the other side, I mean, there are technical issues in how you can make a law that says that. And so there's that. But beside that, the argument against is this. Glenn Youngkin, no, not Glenn Youngkin, the guy he beat down in Virginia.
Northrum. I was going to mention him. Go ahead.
Said
they have a discussion with the mother. That's the way he worded it.
Yeah, and then they would have a discussion with the mother. But, and this is important. Right?
All right.
Because it's just one of the many ways that abortion has corrupted our society.
All right.
When they started down this path after Roe versus Wade, the survival of the baby was the thing that abortionists feared the most. Right? They really did, and did everything they could to avoid that. I can't remember when it was sometime 15 years ago, maybe. There was a whistleblower in Chicago. She was a nurse. They did a...
I must have saw her. When you mentioned that, I think I saw her on one of those shows.
That could be.
Okay.
They did a late-term abortion. Now, in order to do a late-term abortion in any fashion,
all right,
the woman, first of all, she's not that far from delivery, but her cervix has to be dilated. They have to have room to get in there and work. Okay? So, once she's in that dilated condition, the baby has a pretty good chance of getting out. All right? And that's what happens. The baby just comes out whether you want it to or not. Either they miss the age by a little bit or the mother just, well, anyway, the baby just comes out. And in that particular case, that's what happened.
All right.
And they took the baby and they put it in a tray for medical parts or pieces or things and put it over there. And that's how we started having laws that say, if a baby survives an abortion, you can't neglect it. Because they just put it over there. It didn't live long.
Well, okay, because it needs milk, it needs...
Well, it needs air. And it's not suitable. Today, if you have a 20-week or 21-week or 22-week-old baby,
yeah,
it goes right into the NICU. They have a special intensive care unit, right? Because it needs all kinds of assistance. It's not really ready to be born, but yet it is. And so now, and this is one of the horrors, how the corruption of our medical business, right? In the same hospital, in the same day,
all right,
at the same time, 2 different rooms, same babies, 21 weeks old, 22 weeks old. In this room over here, that baby gets born and goes into the NICU. And in this room over here, it goes to the cemetery without a chance of being born. Was that a polite enough way of saying?
Yeah.
Right? And it has done this with everything. They had to change the Hippocratic Oath, for goodness sakes, to allow doctors to do abortions. Because they used to say you can't do them. The Hippocratic Oath's been around for thousands of years.
Incredible. You're making so many good points here. I think we're running out of time. So kind of quickly now. Now, the New Hampshire Right to Life, don't you have a report card on your website rating like state legislatures, not only state legislatures, but people running for Congress, people running for the presidency?
Okay. So New Hampshire Right to Life has 3 branches. We have the committee, which does the bulk of the work. We have the Educational Trust Fund, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. They're all nonprofits. And we have an actual political action committee.
All right.
Right. So the political action committee, every biennium, surveys every statewide office candidate. So every 900 people running for the House of Representatives, 40 or 50 people running for the Senate, however many people are running for governor, the executive council, right? All those things, we surveyed them all, and we don't rate them all. We rate them all, one way or another. And we publish those results, right? What we get and what we don't get. We do not get involved because of the nature of political action group laws, right? We do not deal with the federal races.
Oh, you do not?
No. So when somebody's running for the Senate or governor or president, we do not, right?
All right.
So when Kelly Ayotte was running for Senate, she wanted us to support her, and she came to us to talk to us about that. And we told her, well, where it ended up was we said, we'll do some things to support you, but we're not going to endorse you, and it can't be public.
Okay. New Hampshire Right to Life, per se, cannot...
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that's where we are with that. But yes, we survey and we thoroughly vet, as thoroughly as we can, candidates on life issues. We ask them a whole range of questions. Back in the earlier part of this, you were talking about end-of-life issues as well as, and our focus is on abortion. Well, our efforts have been more directed toward abortion because A, it takes a lot more lives, and B, it resonates with a lot more people, and C, there's $1 billion industry out there trying to kill those babies. On the other end of the spectrum, we're just as active. So we have been fighting a number of times, maybe 5 times now, bills to introduce medical aid in dying, they call it today.
Okay, I was going to bring that up.
They used to call it death with dignity.
Yes,
right?
Dr. Jack Kevorkian.
Yes.
Who died, I looked him up in preparation for this show, died in 2011. And you rarely see that on TV anymore, that people are going through, pursuing these medical-assisted suicides or mercy killing, euthanasia, whatever you want to call it. But people are still dying of horrific pain and suffering in their dying. So they're probably seeking out either, or maybe committing suicides themselves. I don't know. Okay,
so first of all, suicide is the only crime that's not punishable.
So if you're successful, who can you punish?
Right, and if you weren't successful, what are we going to do?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so there you go. Suicide and abortion has this in common with that.
All right.
It's always been, and it always will be. There will always be mothers who, for whatever reasons, don't want their children. And so so they do what they can to make them go away. Whether it involves taking their lives or just the one that was in the tent in Manchester.
All right.
Just this past winter, had a baby in a homeless encampment.
Okay. I must have missed this story.
Spent 18 hours in the freezing cold in a makeshift tent before it was rescued. But it would have just frozen right there. Right? Anyway, so now, as part of that, see, all these things with the pro-life issues, we have on our books a safe haven law in New Hampshire, and it's important to know this. So that any mother who wants to give up her child, who wants to give away her child, up to, I think it's a week, right, after birth, can take it to a safe haven and just give it away. No questions asked, identity protected, right? And we're trying to strengthen that and publicize that more in this upcoming legislative session. We've been working on the language for the bill. It'll get introduced, and I'm hoping it'll get bipartisan support for that, for born babies. But yeah, any fire station, police station, hospital, pretty much any other place of mercy, if somebody's there, you can take it and give it to them. And they can accept it, and the mother's identity, the family identity is protected from disclosure.
All right.
And the baby gets given to the Department of Health and Human Services, and the state owns it.
So that was going to be one of my questions here too. And at Soulfest, I noticed at the display table we were working at, there was zero pamphlets or brochures promoting adoption.
Yeah.
Do you think that it might be in New Hampshire's Right to Life's best interest to start promoting adoption better? I personally know two different families that had a medical type thing where they had to adopt. They couldn't bear children themselves. And both cases, they went overseas to adopt. And one of the people who adopt told me that is sometimes cheaper and easier to go like to China or Vietnam or Ukraine or someplace like that and adopt a baby than it is through the United States.
Yeah, so this is where the law has a conundrum.
All right.
Right, and so first of all, that's what you're saying is absolutely true. Right, I believe way more adoptions from overseas in the United States than from within the United States. Now, that may not technically be true because I don't know how many happen from within the country. But I do know it's a lot easier to go to Ukraine right now as a great example. Right? If you want to adopt a baby in Ukraine, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
And they don't. But we have way more protection for that child that's going to be adopted in our adoption laws. So the parents have to be vetted and blah, blah, blah. You have to jump through 800 hoops, and it takes a long time and costs a lot of money. And yes, it's very difficult, but changing that law, but there's another part to it. And that is those places like Ukraine that I just mentioned.
All right.
People are desperate.
Yeah.
They're generally desperate, right? In the United States, that's not the case. In the United States, we don't have people just starving to death. We don't have people who have no way of getting food. It doesn't exist in our country. The homeless live better than some people they're doing in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
Even in the middle of winter in Manchester, New Hampshire, or wherever, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is it's hard. It's hard for the mothers to give up the children for adoption because God built into us. The mother starts, when the mother gets pregnant, within, I think it's 2 days, the baby controls the pregnancy. And everything in her body changes. And it continues to change in ways that would support the baby, no matter how difficult it is for her. All right? Because guess what? The baby's more important in God's eyes, I guess. It's the only way I can put it.
Yeah.
So, but it's very hard to get babies. I told you my wife ran a pregnancy center, and to persuade women to carry a baby to term to give it up is really, really hard.
But okay, I'll throw out an example here. Well, they're no longer married, but I'm sure the babies their adopted kids are well taken care of. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, they have like 6 adopted babies, a couple from Africa, a couple from China, and I guess maybe from Ukraine, I don't know, but they're divorced now. But anyway, but if they were married, if they adopted from the United States, you see these soap operas and, Lifetime Channel made for TV movies, they say that, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt stole, these millionaire Hollywood legends stole my baby. I'm going to sue them for $50 million or something like that. And so it was safer for them to go overseas. And, what's the chances that the baby's parents are going to try claiming them then?
Oh, well, they're not.
So, okay.
Yeah. So that potential exists in the United States. But again, we have laws and to protect all of these types of things. And that's one of the things that makes it more difficult to adopt within the United States than it is for us to go overseas and get a child. But it's a very expensive process, yeah. We have lots of people paying in the middle tens of thousands of dollars to adopt a baby from Romania or, I don't know, Costa Rica or any place.
China or
China, yeah. Korea.
Vietnam.
Vietnam, yeah.
That's a semi-friendly country now that even a lot of retirees retired to Vietnam now. But anyway, so time flies when you're having fun, eh, Kurt? I think we could have had this show go for another half hour, but I know my director won't let me do it more than an hour. But anyway, is there anything you'd like to say in the next minute or so that we haven't addressed, or something you'd like to elaborate on?
I just want to say,
Sure.
well, two things. One thing, I want to underscore the importance of life and the value of human life, and that we all need to be knowing what we're talking about and doing that, and we need to be using that as a threshold for how we evaluate things during the political process. And the other thing is, I just want to mention chemical abortions, because right now there's a case at the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, to overturn the actual use of those drugs. We'll just call them mifepristone right now, right, in the United States because of their approval, right? Because everything was violated. As with other things having to do with abortion, everything was violated in order to get those things on the market. They've continued to violate their own guidelines and rules in terms of protection of the mothers and side effects of the drugs and all of these types of things. We need to just know about that. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do something within the state of New Hampshire to keep that out of New Hampshire, even if the federal government goes the other way.
Okay, so anyway, if you were blessed what you heard here today, ladies and gentlemen, please log on to NHRTL.org.
Yes.
And there's a whole mess of good information on that. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and join us next time for another episode of Frankly Speaking. Thank you.